had normal American television, so I don't know what to tell y'all. Good Lord. Okay. So many technical problems. That's okay. We fixed them.
Computers are stupid.
It's fine.
I'm gonna knit.
Yes,
because
you're
that's
gonna
more my
knit.
speed.
Excuse me. Ugh. Shelby's gonna play with her cat, and then I'm gonna talk for 2 hours. Cool.
Oh, Yuki's like passed out on my laundry basket.
I'm sure she's had a rough day antagonizing my dog.
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do the intro. And then
Let's
announcements. Okay. Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive. I'm Shannon.
I'm Shelby.
I'm Hannah.
I was waiting for you there.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Do we have any announcements? We haven't recorded in a little bit, so.
School started, and we're blowing up with... You know what, I actually can't say that legally, so never mind. School started.
You can say that there's COVID cases. That's not breaking FERPA.
I don't know that I can.
I'm literally telling you that you can. You're not giving any identifying information.
Okay, you don't know where I work. Anyway,
Yeah, and they don't know where you work.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, you're fine. They have a lot of
get
COVID
nervous.
cases. You're allowed to say that. You're fine.
It fucking sucks.
Also,
Yeah.
like, every school.
Yeah, seriously. Every
Ever
school
right
has a bunch
now.
of COVID cases. Like, yeah.
Get vaccinated for your children's sake. Thank you. That is all.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
My announcement is that we have another cat. Not me and Shannon, but my parents, because my dad found one abandoned at the football field at this high school that he coaches at. So, yeah.
Yep. She's very cute.
It's a tiny little
She's-
kitten, and my mom just sent me a new picture of her, and her name is Pippin.
We got Pep and Pip.
Yep,
And they're
and they're
starting a
starting a
bicycle
girl
gang.
gang.
Yes. Very cute. My announcement is I got mysteriously ill again. I'm fine now, but we have no idea, once again, what the fuck it was. So that's fun.
But you're
For
like,
me.
I can't breathe. I'm going to the hospital. And we were like,
Yeah.
okay.
And I hadn't been breathing for like a
Why?
week, and then the day before that I went to the urgent care, I was like super duper dizzy. And then I was fine Friday morning, but then I made it to work and I was like, yeah, this isn't gonna happen, because I couldn't talk without getting winded. So
Yeah, we worry about Shannon a lot.
yeah. And of course it was while Shelby was not here. So
Yeah. So, you know, I'm like
She was
on
in Florida.
vacation and get a text message, and I was like, does my roommate have COVID?
I don't have COVID. I knew
She
it
does
wasn't
not.
COVID. I knew
And
it
I
wasn't
knew that
COVID.
as well, but I was also like,
That's
I'm
your
not-
panicky first thought, like, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Like-
it was something with, like, your breathing, so... Also,
Yeah.
like, I get a headache these days, and I'm like, is it COVID?
I
As
know,
if I
exactly.
haven't already had it, and
Yeah,
But, you know,
exactly.
it's
Um,
fine.
Yeah.
I had a
got
lovely
mysteriously
vacation in
sick
Vermont
again.
while that was happening.
Yeah. I was here by myself, not breathing. It was great.
Shannon was dying, and Shelby and I were
I was
just living
dying.
it up.
Those two were on vacation.
Yeah,
It's fine. I didn't actually die.
well, that's good. I'm glad.
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
don't want
Um,
to pay 2 people's rent, so...
No, that's fair. I wouldn't want to either.
Rude.
No, I get it.
How are you, Shannon? I hope you're okay. Get well soon. I don't want to pay rent.
I don't want to pay your rent.
So if you could, like, do me the courtesy of not keeling over,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
If you could, like, not die, that would be great. I don't want to
That
pay your
would
rent.
be stellar.
Oh, man. The other announcement I have isn't so much of an announcement. It's more just that I hate the state of Texas. That's about it. But
Oh, yeah.
Listen,
I have been purposely ignoring it because, well, not actually, because I know everything that's going on, but
Mhm.
I am in my head purposely putting a wall up for my own mental health purposes.
You
Because
canceled Texas?
it makes me so angry. And, yeah.
I just really hate that
I am
was
so angry.
secretly born in Texas. It's my biggest shame.
It's
fine.
I hate.
Look, if you don't know what's going on in Texas right now, first of all, you live in a cave if you live in America.
If you live elsewhere, please enjoy your socialized medicine. I really hope it's working out for you. I like
If you have it.
That's not me being sarcastic. That's me
No. We're very jealous that you guys have socialized medicine.
Or
I got an ad on YouTube today while I was watching a ghost show that was like, Senator Jean Shaheen is a socialist commie, Nancy Pelosi's gonna murder all your babies, blah, blah, blah. And it was all about, like, hating on socialism, and I was like, you clearly do not know who is watching this.
Your algorithm needs to get some work
I'm
done.
watching a ghost show. What do you think I believe in?
Well, listen, the ghost hunting community is very divided, Shelby.
That's true. It
is. You are correct.
Think about the amount of cargo pants that happen in that.
I mean, Zach Bagans wears Ed Hardy, so, like...
So, what did you expect?
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, if you're in the U.S. and not happy about it, there are a lot of different organizations you can donate to if you are able to do so. Write letters to people, all that fun stuff that we have to keep doing for things.
Sign petitions.
Yeah, those don't really do anything, but
I know.
You can try.
Stop it. That makes me feel better when I sign petitions.
I know.
I was gonna say,
I sign petitions all the time.
I know. I will say
it's my 2 seconds of feeling better.
Yeah.
I did something
for 2 seconds.
I will say the U.S. Justice Department sued Texas yesterday or Wednesday. I already can't fucking remember. And I read the complaint. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. It's a very good complaint.
Shannon would not shut up about how good
I
the
wouldn't.
complaint was.
I was like, this is like the gold star of complaints. Like, it was amazing. So hopefully they succeed. They filed in federal court in Austin, which is a little bit more liberal than the rest of the state. So hopefully they can get the injunction that they want. As of now, nothing's happened with it. I don't think anything's going to until next week at the earliest. So we'll see. But yeah, so I'm just going to keep my eyes peeled like I do with literally everything else all the time. So
yes.
So Shannon is our main news source.
I am. Well, especially because
I almost said household. You know what? We are a household.
I mean, we are a household. But like I also, at work, we have too many people doing this job, in my opinion. Like, there are too many people doing reference. And so I had nothing to do all day for 6 hours. So I spent a lot of it just reading the news because I had nothing else to do.
That is really bad for your mental health, no offense.
No, I know.
I have zero access to a computer or phone while I'm at work at my current job. So, yeah, Shannon is my news source now.
Yeah.
I had one hit me in the head.
Yeah, she had an iPad hitter today.
I did. Right at my face, knocked my glasses clean off my head. I was not expecting it because I thought my friend was really happy, but
nope.
Apparently I was wrong.
Okay, if we don't have anything else, we can move on to the actual topic, which is a bummer. I'm just going to warn y'all now. It's not a fun one.
Oh, great.
I have notes and a PowerPoint in the episodes folder. It's in the episode 63 folder. It should be anyway. I think I made copies and moved them over.
Yay!
Yeah.
Not yay, because obviously... Yeah, like, not yay, but also yay.
No, not yay. Very anti-yay.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about the Donner
Great,
Party
fucking
today.
hooray.
Just a warning for everyone before we jump in here. There's going to be a lot of deaths of children and cannibalism. So if that is not something you want to hear about, skip the rest of this episode. And if you haven't
guessed it yet... Jeez Louise. Oh my god.
It's not a fun one, guys. Yeah. I don't know why I chose this. I just did. So
because it's fun.
Here we are.
In a morbid, terrible, not fun way.
Yeah, we get to complain about a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah. Yeah, we get to complain about a whole bunch of old-timey shit again. So,
yay!
Okay, so, my sources.
It's not more Victorian nonsense that's not Victorian, though.
It's not. Right?
What year is it?
I don't know.
This actually was during the Victorian era. So... by like 9 years.
Yeah.
Because it was in 1846.
Oh, wow. So it is, Victorian nonsense. Here we go.
It is, but it's American Victorian nonsense. Which is a very different flavor of Victorian nonsense.
Yeah.
It's not Victorian.
No, it's not. It's its own special little thing. Okay, so my sources. I had quite a few. I got a lot of my stuff from this website called DonnerPartyDiary.com. It was made in 1996 and looks like it hasn't been updated since then, but the guy does update it constantly. It's a very good website, and it has a whole bunch of primary sources on it. DonnerPartyDiary.com. It had a lot of good information on it.
You know what that sounds like?
What?
Do you remember those books from when we were kids? I know you do, because I know we've talked about it before, but the ones where it was like the diary written from like a historical person's perspective. Mm-hmm. Because I still have my Anastasia one, but
it's not even remote. The website's nothing like that at all.
Oh, I'm aware. It just reminded me of that, and I was like, "Can you imagine?"
A lot of blue text.
Yeah, it's a very informative website.
But like, can you imagine if someone had written that book,
I know.
The Donner Party Diaries?
Yeah, they probably
today we ate
that
Mammy.
one.
It was great. Yeah. She was so tasty.
They actually tried really hard not to eat their relatives, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so some other sources were historytoday.com, which is not the History Channel. It's a different website. There were two different articles from KQED, which is an independent station from somewhere. I didn't look at where. I have stuff from NPR, Wikipedia, the History Channel, this other website called forlornhope.org, which talked about the snowshoe expedition, which I can't say that, so this is going to be fun for all of us when we get there.
Did you say KQKD?
KQED.
Wait, what?
KQED.
ED.
Like the news station. I just don't know where it is. I didn't bother looking.
I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
I want to know. San Francisco.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, I thought it was somewhere in California, but I didn't bother to look. And then a lot of like the contextual stuff I got from a book called The Indifferent Stars Above by Daniel James Brown. I'm actually listening to it, which I think is why I decided to choose this topic. I have not finished it because honestly it's kind of dry and kind of slow going, but I am chugging along. And it focuses on like one person. Like obviously they talk about like everyone, but it focuses on just Sarah Graves Fosdick, who we'll talk about later as well. So first, because it's me, we are going to go over a shit ton of historical context. One, just because I want to, and two, I think it's important to understand why people made this trip in the first place. Right? So if we go to slide 2, these are just pictures of like westward immigration and wagons and all that. So this trip was an attempted immigration leaving from Missouri, hoping to end up in California, and they left Missouri in May of 1846. So there was a lot going on.
My eyeballs are watering, and it burns so bad I can't open them currently. So
cool.
Anyway, just thought you needed to know that.
Oh my god, can everyone please stop having medical emergencies?
Oh, no, this is a daily occurrence. I am allergic to my own tears, okay?
Oh my god.
Okay, I don't have that at least. Like,
Anyway, keep going. I just can't open my eyes, so I'm not looking
You
at
don't
pictures.
need to. You don't need to see anything. It's fine.
Shannon will describe it in visceral detail.
I'll just describe
Don't
everything.
worry.
It's fine. Okay, so, yeah, they
There's
left
a
in
mountain and some trees.
So, there was a lot going on in the 1840s. So,
yes.
We were in an economic depression. It was the Panic of 1837, was still in full swing. So, many farmers in the Midwest were reduced to subsistence farming. Wow, I can't talk. This is going to be fun. And many communities utilized a barter economy, which isn't, like, bad, but if you're trying to grow economically, it kind of is, you know, because nobody has any money.
Yeah.
The selling price of produce and meat was super low, so farmers in the Midwest were looking to move westward for different opportunities. And at this point, most people going on the Oregon Trail or the California Trail or whatever, they lived in somewhere in the Midwest, usually Illinois or Missouri, maybe Indiana. Basically, everything west of Missouri.
Then die of dysentery.
No, not usually. Maybe
no,
malaria.
You said the Oregon Trail.
No, I
Oregon
know.
Trail.
I know.
Jeez, Shannon.
I know. Okay. So, anyway, they were mostly coming from the Midwest. Everything west of Missouri was either Mexican territory or American territory. There weren't any states west of Missouri, really, yet. Other than, no, not Texas. We're going to get into Texas. So, most of the people moving...
Don't get me started on Texas.
Yeah, most of the people immigrating westward were from the Midwest, or they left from the Midwest. Most people left from Independence or St. Joseph, Missouri. So,
I mean, to be fair, the Midwest is pretty trash, so.
Yeah, which we're about to get into another part of the reason why it was trash. Central Illinois specifically had a really bad malaria problem, apparently. They called it the Illinois Shakes, because they didn't know that it was malaria. It got carried over from enslaved Africans. It's a different strain of malaria than what is most prevalent in India and sub-Saharan Africa. So instead of killing you outright, it gives you a whole bunch of symptoms that can reoccur weeks or even years later.
That's what you get for slavery, so.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, so like people did die from it, but most of the time you were just like super disgustingly sick for like a week or two. Yeah. And then a few weeks later you get sick again. And then 5 years later you get sick again. But like they didn't.
And it's probably completely different from any strain of malaria we have today.
Probably, yeah. And like they obviously didn't know that it was because of mosquitoes. So there wasn't really like a whole lot because they didn't know what germs were. So
just the general air in Illinois made you shake.
No, literally that's what it was because that was the theory at the time.
I know how Victorians think.
Yeah, the miasma theory. It's just bad air. Yeah.
Bad air. Better go smell some poppies or something. Get that stink out of your system.
So
your humors.
Yeah, so Central Illinois specifically had a really bad malaria problem. There was also cholera and malaria in other parts of the Midwest. And this meant that a lot of people were wanting to move west for their health, which is like pretty common at the time and even well into the 20th century. So that was just another factor as to why people wanted to leave the Midwest. But, so California at the time was the property of Mexico. So it was called Alta California. So if you wanted to immigrate there, you were supposed to become naturalized citizens of Mexico, but the vast majority of American immigrants ignored that, and so they were technically illegal immigrants.
Oh my god, what's fucking new? We are such hypocrites and jackasses.
Yeah, we also did not have control of Oregon until, well, I'm about to say when. Oregon was weird, but they were mostly controlled by the British. So technically we were also supposed to like become British citizens. It was a whole thing. People just ignored it and just lived there, quote unquote, illegally. So on top of all of this, there was the Mexican-American War and the concept of manifest destiny. So if you can go to slide 3, this is just a map that shows like what areas were owned by what country in the 1840s. And so with manifest destiny, this idea had been around for a little bit longer, but it was really pushed by President James K. Polk. So this is a quote from, what was that noise? You good?
I had a hiccup in there.
Okay.
I can 100% tell you right now that I have never once thought about James K. Polk.
No, the only time you think about him is in connection to the Mexican-American War. Because that's all he did.
Not true. The only time I ever think about him is when I used to watch, what was that show called? Like the Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide.
That was the school they went to. Yeah,
middle school or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I never watched that show, so.
What? That was such a good show.
That was a very good show.
That show was really popular when I lived overseas, and AFN didn't have it yet.
Ah.
So, because we were
Gotcha.
about 4 years behind.
Gross.
Oh yeah, the only show I watched growing up in Germany was one that was in German, and do you remember the Gargoyles show from the 90s?
Yes!
Uh-huh.
That was all we had that was in English.
Nice.
So I was like super into that as a 3-year-old. I was like, this is my shit.
I watched a lot of Hannah Montana reruns because that's all that we got in Korea. So, yeah, good times.
I had normal American television, so I don't know what to tell y'all.
Listen, shut the hell your mouth.
Okay,
Anyway.
Manifest Destiny. Okay, this is a quote from KQED. Manifest Destiny propagated the idea that it's our divine right and duty to build a country coast to coast after the Louisiana Purchase. So,
Ugh.
Polk really popularized that sea to shining sea idea, right? And so this is a quote from History Today. It was embraced by the Democrats, and this was before the party switch.
These are the bad Democrats.
Yeah, these were the Democrats who were conservative. So it was embraced by the Democrats who saw white Anglo-Saxon America as a civilizing Christian influence with a rightful claim to the whole continent, regardless of the long histories of the native peoples or European powers they found there. So basically, they were like, fuck these people, I want to be here, I have a right to be here because I am an American, damn it. And that was basically why all these people moved west.
And we haven't changed since.
I was going to say, that's a very American sentiment.
Yeah. So we had this theory floating around, and most American citizens, supported it. And so Polk, when he was elected, he ran, his entire campaign, not entire, but, most of his campaign, was, he wanted Texas, the Oregon Territory, and California. And California at the time included, Utah and Nevada and Arizona. It was a huge area. They just called it Alta California. He wanted all of it. So Polk annexed Texas in 1845, which at the time was kind of an independent nation. It's more detailed than that, but I don't want to get into it because the history of Texas is a massive clusterfuck. So we annexed...
It is, and we were
it
taught
is.
so incorrectly.
Yeah.
As American children. Remember how you had to watch Remember the Alamo as a child?
Yeah.
Well, that was total bullshit and a
Yeah.
lie, so
Yeah.
none of that is true.
Yeah.
And we just made an American folk hero out of, a bunch of fucking idiots who...
That's all of our American folk heroes are a bunch of fucking idiots.
And Texas's history hasn't gotten any better.
Nope. So...
in the present. So...
Yeah, we annexed Texas. That's all you need to know. So the southern boundary of Texas was disputed. It was either between the Rio Grande and another river. I don't know which one. I did not write it down. And this led to Polk declaring war in mid-1846. He was literally just looking for a reason because he really wanted Texas. So at about the same time, he basically bullied Britain into giving him Oregon.
Okay.
It worked. So then we had Oregon as of 1845. And then, as I said, at the time, the California area was technically an unorganized territory that included modern-day California, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona, as well as parts of, Idaho and Wyoming. And it was controlled by Mexico. It was largely populated by small white settlements and Native American settlements. So, yes, there is a war going on that is fighting over the area that these people are traveling through, which they think they have a right to travel through simply because they are white Americans. So that is the mindset going into this trip. And I just think it's not necessarily important to this actual incident. I just think it's important to recognize going forward.
Can I ask a quick question that is related, but it's not
Yes,
going to
you
sound
can.
like it's related?
Yes.
Have either of you ever watched Holy Musical Batman?
Yes.
The song That's the American Way
Yes.
really comes to mind.
Yes.
That's the American, not quite Canadian. Most of us are Mexican way. It's such A good
Yes.
song. Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I also want to note that the military being busy became an issue for the Donner Party later on.
I'm sorry, the military's busy today.
Basically, yeah. I mean, like I said, we'll get into it later. But so, okay, the group itself. So if you can go to the next slide, these are just pictures of a wagon train because I wanted to illustrate, like, these are long trains. So, you know, it wasn't ever just one family unless something really bad happened. People didn't want to do this trip alone for various reasons and often joined up with other groups that were making the trip because they were basically all going to the same place, you know? Mm-hmm. So it just made more sense to travel across the desert with more than just you guys in case something bad happened. And then a lot of people like joined and left at various times. And so the group we are going to focus on is like the actual Donner Party, which is a smaller group that broke off from the larger wagon train. That one had about 500 wagons.
Holy moly.
Gross.
We're not talking about them at all. So we're only talking about the Donner Party, and they split off from the larger train in order to take a new shortcut across the Sierra Nevadas, which we'll talk about.
That just sounds like the worst fucking idea. Like,
we'll get there.
A new shortcut.
We will get there.
I know. I can't contain my frustration.
So out of that larger group, these people made up the Donner Party. And I got all this information from the Donner Party Diary website. And I got most of these pictures from there as well. So if you can go to the next slide, these are various members of the Donner family. So it was two brothers, George and Jacob. I think the guy on the left there is George, but I'm not 100% sure. Their wives, Tamsin and Elizabeth. And I think Tamsin is on the right. And then their kids. Between the two families, there were 12 kids. And then the one in the middle is Eliza Donner. Don't know whose kid she is. I just know her name is Eliza Donner. So George and Jacob, they each had 3 wagons and 2 teamsters. And teamsters were people who, like, drove the wagons and were just, like, they just helped with the trip. And a lot of people, like, a lot of men, I should say, who wanted to make the trip west but didn't have, like, the money or the family to do it themselves, they would get hired on as teamsters so that they could actually make the trip. So they had 3 wagons, the families, the 2 teamsters, and another person who may have been a family friend, but who also may have been a teamster. It's unclear. So that's the Donners. There were also the Reeds. So if you can go to slide 6, this is James and Margaret Reed. They also had their 3 children, Margaret's 75-year-old mother, and they had 5 employees. And then I didn't put this in here just because I didn't think it was relevant, but now I want to bring it up. So they had their wagon was called I'm going to get it wrong now. I think a Prairie Palace. It was basically like a house on wheels. It was ridiculously extravagant, especially for the trip that they were taking. And they ended up having to dump it anyway. So, that's what the Reeds are working with here. So you can go to slide 7. This is the Breen family. So that's Patrick and Margaret, who Margaret went by Peggy because English is fun, so Peggy is a nickname for Margaret. They had 7 children. Yeah. They had 7 children. There were also the Eddies. So if you go to slide 8, that is William Eddy on the left. It was William and Eleanor, and then their 2 children. There were also the Murphys, and some of the members of the Murphys are on that picture on the right. I don't know who. So there was Lavina Murphy, who was widowed. Her 7 children, 2 sons-in-law, and 2 grandchildren. I think they were like the largest group. There were the Kaysbergs. So if you go to slide 9, right? Yeah, slide 9. That is Louis Kaysberg on the left. So it was Louis and a Philippine. They had a daughter, and then they also had a son who was born like during the trip. They also had a teamster, and a Belgian man named Hardcoop joined them in Fort Bridger. There was also, I think...
Yes, they're teamster and they're Belgian.
Yeah, basically.
Which sounds like they had a horse, because that's a kind of horse.
I know.
But it was just a man.
Yeah. There was also a man whose last name was Wolfinger, I believe, and his wife Doris. I believe they were German immigrants. There were also a couple of single men named Augustus Spitzer and Joseph Reinhardt who were traveling with the group. And then there were the McCutcheons, which on the right is William McCutcheon. It was William and Amanda, and then their infant daughter. There was also the Graves family. So if you can go to slide 10, There was Franklin and Elizabeth, their 9 children, 1 son-in-law, and a teamster. So
they look like they have seen some shit.
Yeah, these are all survivors, so...
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, so I don't remember who the one is on the left. I don't remember. But she was one of the survivors. The girl in the middle is Sarah Graves Fosdick, who she was the one, her husband was the son-in-law. His name is Jay Fosdick. She's the one that The Indifferent Stars Above, that book focuses on. And then on the right is Mary Ann Graves. So Sarah was 20 or 21, I can't remember off the top of my head, and Mary Ann was 19 when this all was happening. And then there was also Charles Stanton. If you can go to slide 11, this is a drawing of Charles Stanton. There was also a few more people, and then we're done. There was a man named Luke Halloran. So he had tuberculosis and had been kicked out of another group in Wyoming. So he ended up joining the Donners in Wyoming. There was a shepherd named Antonio who joined them at some point. I don't know literally anything else about Antonio. And then some random dude named Jean-Baptiste Trudeau joined them at Fort Bridger. So that all in all... literally
be a relative of mine.
So all in all, there were 87 people in the Donner Party. Some sources said 81 or 83, but most say 87, so I'm just going to go with 87.
Oh my god, Peppa just bit me.
Whoa.
What is wrong with you? Oh my god, hold on. I have to.
No, you're fine.
You're not cute.
Please leave that in.
I'm going to. That was my first thought, was I'm going to have to leave that in now.
She just came in and bit me on the back of my arm, that, like, soft part.
Uh-huh.
That hurt, and it scared me.
Okay. Are you settled?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So, now we are going to talk about their plan. So, if you can go to slide 12, this is a map of... So, that one in red is the Oregon Trail. And then you see in Fort Hall, it kind of splits off and because kind of pink and kind of blue and kind of red. That's the California Trail. So there were several trails that took people to Oregon and California, and as you can see here, they overlapped in a lot of places. So the Donner Party's larger group, the initial plan was to take the Oregon Trail. So that's that one in red. So it started in Independence, Missouri, and ended in Oregon City, Oregon. It was a 2,000-mile trip and usually took 5 or 6 months to complete. So...
I'm not into that.
Yeah, no. So
I like camping, but not that much.
No. So the Donners left from Springfield, Illinois. I know the Graveses left from a small town near Peoria, Illinois. So they were coming even further because they had the entire state of Missouri and then half of Illinois to get across. And then they met up with many other families in Independence, and then several other groups joined them before traveling through what is now Kansas. So, as I said, the original plan was to proceed on the regular trail through Fort Hall in what is now Idaho. And then they would split and follow the established California Trail. So they would go south on the California Trail instead of going north on the Oregon Trail. It wasn't, like, easy. Like, I'm not trying to downplay this at all. Like, it was not an easy journey. But it was relatively safe, and the trails were already used so much that there shouldn't have been any surprises. Like, the trails were clear, it had already been worn down from wagon use, it was safe for wagons to go through, all that. I mean, you had to deal with, you were on a prairie, there's no tree cover, if a storm rolls in, you have to deal with the storm, there were rattlesnakes, there was disease, like, it wasn't fun. I'm not trying to, like, downplay that at all, but if they had done what they were supposed to, this would not have happened.
This is why when you go hiking and you get lost, you're supposed to stay where you are.
Yep.
Or, like, you're not even supposed to go off the trail to begin with. Because this is what happens to you when you try to make your own way. Looking at you, Paula Farley. I know what you're about in the woods. She's tried to get us killed multiple times. And now
See, I don't believe in trails when I'm in the woods, which has been a problem.
Okay, we're never going hiking. I hope you're aware of that.
You are not allowed to come hiking in Maine because you will find a moose and it will fucking kill you.
Look, if I am with other people, I will stay on the trail and be safe. But if I am with me and my sister,
Oh,
Okay,
my
me and
God.
my sister.
So in the least safe option for you to make your own trail with your phone never charged.
You two are banned from the forest.
Have you met my sister? Nothing bad can ever happen when she's around.
You know what?
They
You're
said the
banned from
Titanic
forest.
wouldn't sink either.
You know what? Shut up and stop poking holes in my flawless plans in life, okay?
Do what? Live in the woods?
Why do you think I live in cities, okay?
That's fair.
Because
Good.
That's fair.
That's probably safer for you.
I need a road sign to tell me where to go.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
God.
So, the beginning of the trip. The group of 500 wagons left Independence, Missouri on May 14th, 1846. It wasn't like an established group. It was just a train. You know what I mean? Like, there wasn't like some hierarchy or anything. It was just people following each other across the prairie.
There ain't
So-
no
Well, I
mayor.
mean, when there's 500, like, that's a small town. So, like,
Yeah, because
the
there's-
wagon at the back is not talking to the wagon at the front. They're not
No.
friends, okay?
Yeah, no.
But
they
by
probably
God, do
didn't
they know
even
the
who was
gossip?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So a week later, another
It's a really
group
long
of
line of telephone to get the gossip.
a week later, a group of 50 wagons joined them. So now there were 550 wagons. And then the Murphys, Eddies, Breens, Kaysbergs, Wolfingers, and a lot of the single travelers also joined them after leaving Independence, which again isn't really relevant. I just want to be accurate because it's me. They were pretty much the last to leave that year. And conventional wisdom said not to leave past May 1st because leaving any later greatly increased the risk of getting stuck in the mountains due to the snow. So just keep that in mind. So they followed the trail to Fort Laramie in what is now Wyoming. Along the way, Margaret Keyes, who was James Reed's mother-in-law, died of tuberculosis near Alcove Springs in Kansas. Other than that, it was like pretty uneventful. They traveled about 18 to 20 miles per day. And this is just like some weird little traveling context that I got from Indifferent Stars. So the book points out that most of the time you were walking because riding in the wagons or on a horse could burden the animals even more and you didn't want to tire them out because it was a 2,000-mile journey. Also points out that the trail went through like prairies. We don't really have those anymore. We've kind of killed them all. But the entire middle chunk of the country, from the Mississippi basically until you hit the Rockies, used to be a prairie. And it's characterized by little tree cover and prairie grasses, some of which could get up to 6 feet tall.
Yep. Dude,
So-
I know you say we don't have a lot of prairie left, but Montana is the prairie.
Yeah, Montana's pretty much
used
it.
Yeah, I used to live on the fucking prairie, let me tell you.
I was gonna say, South Dakota has a lot of prairie, and they are
I just
working
mean,
to
like,
restore it, but yes.
Comparatively, we don't
No,
have
no,
a
no,
lot
I
anymore.
know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
You
I
can-
know what
if
you
drive-
mean. I just, there are, like, organizations
of
in
prairie.
place working to restore the
Oh
prairie.
yeah, there's some in Illinois too. They're all over the
You
place.
can drive most of the highways in the Midwest. If you drive and you look for them, you can see prairie restoration areas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Cool.
Like, that's
I
what
always
my
tell
sister's
students
old
about
job
it, and they're
was,
like,
so,
"You're fucking
like-
annoying."
Yeah. So,
Alright,
That's
let's
what
everyone
Jess
talk
used
at
to
once.
do.
Ready, set, go.
okay, you both
Okay.
can't talk at the same time every single goddamn time.
That's what I just said. I said, everyone, let's talk at the same time. Ready, set, go.
See, I couldn't
You're all
even hear
talking
you
at the
because
same
you
time.
both were talking. Anyway.
All right, you know what? I'm gonna jump out the window. Bye.
Okay, bye. So, on top of all of this,
Shannon is out for fucking blood.
we're
today,
on
what?
page 5 of 19.
Okay, well, maybe don't be such a prolific writer. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, so if you didn't stock up on enough provisions in Missouri, you were also kind of fucked because the trail went through a bunch of like outposts and forts, but you couldn't guarantee what they would have available. So
We got this Belgian.
Yeah,
You want
pretty
it?
much. So they made it to Fort Laramie without anything out of the norm happening. Let's just say that. So at this point, we are going to be introduced to Lansford Hastings. So if you go to slide 13, this is Lansford Hastings. He was a self-described mountain man, and if you have to
Those are some
self-describe that,
brows.
yeah.
Oh, I've been on the wrong slide the whole time because you were talking about like a blue-red trail, and I was like, Shannon, they're all in black.
Oh, yeah, you were one ahead. Yeah, we should be on slide 13 now. So,
Okay, now I have to look at this in detail. Continue.
Okay, so Western migration had become a huge industry, and Hastings wanted to take advantage of it. So he had actually published a travel guide in 1842, so 4 years before this even happened, which proposed a more direct route to California. So the standard route went through Idaho's Snake River Plain to the north, and then it wound back south because there was like a valley there, and that made more sense than climbing over the fucking Sierra Nevadas in a wagon. But
God, can you imagine?
I can, because these people fucking did that. So Hastings' route cut straight across the Great Basin, the Wasatch Mountain Range, and the Great Salt Lake Desert, then rejoined the traditional trail. So, like, you did go back onto the traditional trail. It wasn't a brand new one once you left Fort Hall. It was a quote-unquote shortcut that was supposed to save 350 miles getting you across the Sierra Nevadas. It also ran through Fort Bridger. So Fort Bridger was run by a man named James Bridger. It was basically a small supply outpost in what is now Black Forks, Wyoming. Bridger and Hastings had like a deal where Hastings would promote the route so that Fort Bridger could get more people coming through. So he had a financial incentive to promote this trail. Hastings also sent letters back east to promote the new trail. So James Reed, who again was one of the main like leaders, I suppose, of the Donner Party, he had heard about this new trail, and he decided to split off from the main group and go south to Fort Bridger while the rest went north to Fort Hall. So now if you want to go to slide 14, this is the routes that they took. So that's point on the very far right is basically Fort Hall. The route on the north is what you were supposed to take. The route going south was the Hastings cutoff, and the route that the Donner Party ended up taking. So obviously the rest of these families decided to go with him, and they voted for George Donner to be the leader. Technically, Reed... Yes.
I mean, obviously, like, I know that they didn't have this map with them.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't seem like a shorter trail.
It's not.
Is it the cow skull in the middle of the desert?
Also,
because that's really doing it for me.
Yeah, they voted for George Donner to be the leader. Technically, James Reed had more experience. He had actually, like, done mountaineering and stuff before. But nobody liked James Reed. They thought he was really full of himself and annoying. So they voted George Donner to be the leader instead. So when they got to Fort Bridger, which that is... So they had already left Fort Hall. They had already split up from the main group. Right, and Fort Bridger was that, like, last outpost before you went through Hastings Cutoff. When they got there, quite a few people warned them not to continue on the trail. So there was a journalist named Edwin Bryant. He didn't actually, like, directly warn them. So he had seen the first part of the trail and was worried that it would be too difficult for wagons. And so he sent letters back east warning people not to take the trail. It appears that no one in the Donner Party saw these letters, but they were, like, out there. There's also a man named James Kleiman. So he was an old friend of Reed's. They just happened to run into each other at Fort Laramie. And Reed told him, like, hey, I'm thinking of taking this cutoff. And Kleiman was actually headed back from California and warned Reed that the wagons wouldn't be able to make it through Hastings Cutoff. Because he was like, I've been near that area. It isn't made for wagons. You will not, like, this is not a good idea. Don't do it. But Jim Bridger, who owned Fort Bridger, told the party that the shortcut was a smooth trip and that it would shorten their journey by 350 miles. He also said that it was...
he would. He owns it.
Well, he has a financial incentive to get people to take the trail because then they have to come through his fort. And so he also said that it was easy terrain, that it was devoid of Native Americans, and that there was ample water along the way. All of which was wrong. So they decided to take the shortcut.
So you just straight up lied.
Yes, straight up lied. So they had wanted to join another group, but they were a week behind. So there was another party called the Harlan Young Party. So Hastings had actually left with this group to guide them through it. That was the first time he had ever taken his own shortcut.
Oh.
Wow.
My God.
Do you know what he did? He looked at a map of the Oregon Trail and the California Trail through the mountains, and he drew a line across it. And said, that'll work.
Oh my God.
I love people.
Yeah. So, yeah. So
Let me
basically...
just draw a line Yeah, that'll work. I don't know. Sure.
Yeah. So basically, when the Donner Party took this route, literally no one else had ever taken it before. There were no established paths or roads, and there is no evidence that even any Native Americans took a path through that area. Because it was insanely difficult to get through, and there are easier ways around it.
I held back earlier when you said that it was devoid of Native Americans, and I was thinking, that is a sign. That is a sign that it is totally impassable. You fucking idiots! Why do you think people would already be inhabiting a place? Because it's passable. That's why. So if you're going to a place where there is
inhabited,
no one,
exactly,
then that's a sign to not go there.
You think, but
you would think
stupid white people and their stupid white people thoughts. So Hastings cut off.
Victorian nonsense.
Stupid white people. Oh my god, that should be our podcast. It's called Stupid White People and Stupid White People Thoughts, but it's about the Victorian era.
Yes.
Okay, we're starting this. We're doing this next week.
Okay. So.
Have fun planning that.
So, they left Fort Bridger on July 31st, 1846. They almost immediately realized that the terrain was far more difficult than they'd been led to believe. So if you go to 15, these are the mountains they were trying to get through.
Oh,
this is a mistake. I immediately regret this decision.
Yep.
I tell all these East Coast people here who are like, the White Mountains are crazy. I'm like, you have never fucking seen a mountain. Go out west. So
right.
I meant to ask this earlier. I know Hannah has. Shelby, you've been to like the Rocky Mountain area at some point. Yes? No?
I lived at the base of those bitches.
I knew you did.
I have flown over them many times and seen them from outside.
Until you've seen them, it's just like, you could see them, because like, I've driven to Colorado a couple of times. You can see the mountains from so fucking far away, partially because the rest of it is so flat. It is just, it's so fucking steep. Even on like modern day roads, it's so steep. There are sheer drops everywhere.
I was going to say, I have driven through many, many mountains, and none of them look like these. So, You've
driven through, like, the Appalachians.
Yeah, I've driven through
those are glorified hills, okay?
And then, like, Palm Springs, the mountains outside of there.
Those are still way too short. Yeah, those are still too similar.
For sure. Like, they're still not to this level.
Like,
but, yeah.
They're similar to, like, the Swiss Alps level of, like, mountain. Like,
I've been there. I almost choked on a bee in my apple juice when I was in the Swiss Alps.
The only, like, mountain... Nope, it's a volcano, I lied. So, nope. Have not been on mountains like these.
Yeah.
I have seen them.
They have to rebuild the roads every year in some places. Like, in Montana, in Glacier, they have to rebuild the Going to the Sun Road every year because it just... avalanches every fucking year.
I was gonna say, like, my sister has sent me pictures from, like, up in Alaska of mountains like these, but, like, personally, I have only seen them from inside of a plane.
So now imagine going across it on a wagon.
No,
that
thank you.
is not possible.
Yeah, so obviously there were extremely steep inclines, and those often forced them to lock their wagon wheels.
Also, not a wagon that's basically a house on wheels, like...
Yeah, no, it was way too heavy. They basically...
We're not glamping in these mountains, okay?
Yeah, they had to lock the wheels and basically have the oxen just drag them behind, because otherwise they were going to lose control. And there wasn't an established route. And, like, I want to emphasize that they were not just walking. They were carrying, like, they were on wagons. You have to have room for wagons. Like, because, like, I feel like a lot of people, I mean, and I kind of did this too when I first researched it. I was like, oh yeah, they had to make their own trail. But then it's like, yes, but with wagons. Like,
okay, a wagon is, like, twice the width of a car back in those days.
They were, So... on top of the really steep incline,
those poor cows.
Yeah,
they were probably like halfway there. Like, I wish I had been a cheeseburger.
I know. So they also had to constantly move rocks and brush and trees and just stuff.
I was gonna say, can you imagine the amount of forest that they had to level once they got to the
Yep.
base of the mountains when there are trees again.
Yeah.
I just can't.
Yeah.
Can't fathom
The
too
directions,
much.
yeah, on top of that, the directions that they had received were often really difficult to follow. And, like, none
Because
of them...
no one had been there!
Yeah. Like, and on top of that, none of them had ever had to forge their own path through a mountain before. So, like, they didn't know how to do it.
Aren't these, like, farmers from
Yes, they're farmers.
Illinois?
Yes, they are mostly farmers
Yeah.
from Illinois. Yeah. So...
God.
So, remember...
And if there's one thing a farmer from Illinois is, it's how to climb a fucking mountain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're from the flattest state in the nation, but okay.
So, remember that Hastings was traveling about, like, a week to 10 days ahead of them. So, he was basically, like, leaving them notes on trees and telling them where to go. So...
No!
Yeah, so on August 6th, they found a letter from Hastings telling them to stop. So this was like a week in. They were already being told to stop. Hastings wanted to show them an alternate route to the one that he was currently on. So 3 members of the party, so Reed, Charles Stanton, and William Pike, who he was one of the Murphy son-in-laws, they rode ahead to get Hastings. They had to go through canyons.
Boy.
They were fine. They had to go through canyons and move boulders and saw that there was a river that would be very easy for the wagons to fall into because it was basically like in a canyon. So yeah, so
that's how rivers and mountains work.
yeah, it was a very sheer drop. So they found
good
Hastings, who followed them only part of the way back and gave them like general directions to avoid this canyon. Because basically with this canyon, so the Harlan Young group, they made it out fine, more or less. Like, they didn't endure, like, they went through hell, but they didn't go through the hell that the Donner Party did, basically.
They didn't fucking eat each other, so...
Yeah, they didn't eat each other. They made it out. They were the last group to make it out of the Sierra Nevadas that year. They did make it out. They, like, I left this out, but now I'm going to talk about it anyway. So they were going through Weber Canyon, which is the canyon that Hastings was like, hey, you guys go around it, okay? If they'd gone through the canyon, they probably would have been fine, honestly. But the canyon was just so bad. Like, they had to physically pick up parts of the wagon and move it because they just couldn't get it through. Like, it was horrible.
Oh my god.
So, the Donner Party went around this canyon. So, Stanton and Pike stopped to rest. Reed went back to the rest of the group and told them what was going on. So, now they had a decision to make. They could either turn back and go back to Fort Bridger and go on the established trail. They could follow the Harlan Young Party through Weber Canyon, or they could follow Hastings' new directions around the canyon. At Reed's urging, they decided to follow Hastings' new directions. So at this point, their progress slowed to about 1.5 miles per day. And remember, like, on the prairie, which, to be fair, it's completely different terrain, but they had been doing 18 to 20. And if they had been on the normal path, they probably still would have been making about 10. I'm just guessing, but it wouldn't have been slowed to 1.5 miles per day.
Oh my
That's
god.
like nothing. Like, you send the
Yeah.
kids ahead and are like,
You can see.
alright, I guess go make camp.
You can see 1.5 miles away. Like,
Yeah.
your eyes
I was gonna
work
say-
that far.
Your eyes look...
You can
Like-
walk a mile in about, on
you,
like
Shannon.
flat, plain terrain. You can walk a mile in about 15 minutes without, like, hauling a wagon and all of that.
You can't.
No, that's a very fast mile.
People can't even run 1 mile in 15 minutes.
Yes, they can.
Well, they can't. You know what I mean. Most people. Let's say most people.
I was gonna say, I know people
Okay.
have 6-minute miles.
Well, apparently I'm wrong then, because I used to walk a mile in 15 minutes in high school, but okay.
Okay, I just Googled it, and Google says it's 15 to 22. How the fuck is that accurate?
I can't
Whatever.
walk that fast.
I can, and I can't walk that fast.
I've run a mile in like 7 minutes.
Okay, I guess I'm just super out of shape then. Anyway.
Shannon, you don't have lungs.
That's true.
Okay?
I
That
don't.
is true. Shannon
I forgot to
does
factor
lack
that in. Maisie!
the
Hi,
necessary
Maisie.
organ for that.
Yeah, I forgot to factor that in. Anyway,
Anyway.
the progress slowed to 1.5 miles per day. By August 20th, they had barely made any progress, and it ended up taking them 2 weeks to get out of the Wasatch Mountain Range.
Love that for them.
Yeah, so while this was happening, tempers were starting to run kind of high. So a lot of the men...
Why?
I
Why
know!
would that be?
Crazy. So a lot of the men started arguing, and they were becoming resentful of Reed, who had, like, chosen this route. Food and supplies were running out for some of the families. And then Stanton and Pike, who, remember, they'd gone up with Reed to see Hastings. They stopped to rest on the way back. Yeah, they got lost. But the rest of the group found them. They were, like, a day away from eating their horses. So
wow.
They were, like, super malnourished at this point. So, but they made it out of the Wasatch Mountain Range. And then they were faced with the Great Salt Lake Desert. So,
that's where the cow skull is.
Yeah!
On the map.
Yes, that's where the cow skull is on the map. So, before they actually set out onto that, Luke Halloran died of tuberculosis on August 25th. And then a few days later, while they were still traveling between the mountains and the actual, like, desert part, they found a note from Hastings which told them that there were 2 days and nights of really difficult travel ahead and that there wasn't any grass or water during this part of the trek. So, they rested for about 36 hours. They collected water. They tried to get grass for all the livestock. And then they set off across the Great Salt Lake Desert. So if you can go to the next slide. So this desert is a dry lake bed covered in salt. It's the Salt Flats in Utah, basically.
Cool.
Yeah, during the day, I'm assuming this is still the case, but I don't know because I've never been there and I didn't look into it. So during the day, moisture underneath the salt rises to the crust and turns it into basically gum.
Ew.
So that's fun with wagon wheels.
And, like, animal feet.
Yeah.
And your feet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so...
your one pair of shoes that you've had since you were 9.
Yeah, they're going to be covered in salt gum, basically. So,
Gross.
yeah, so the
That
parties...
doesn't sound corrosive at all.
No, not at all. They set off on August 30th. The wagon wheels immediately sank into the salt. The temperatures were crazy high during the day and then freezing at night because it's a fucking desert. They ran out of water after 3 days, and remember, Hastings told them it was only 2. A lot of the animals basically went crazy with dehydration and broke away and ran off searching for water. Some became so ill and they felt the need to abandon the wagon. So some were left tied to wagons and just abandoned because there was nothing else that they could do with them. No humans died, but they lost several wagons and a lot of their livestock. So it took them 6 days and was actually 80 miles instead of 40, which is what Hastings had told them it was.
Hastings is fired. He's not allowed to ever look at a map again, be near people, give directions, not even to the corner store. He's done. He's out. He can go to...
I have a follow-up with him later that will make you more mad and then will make you happy. So,
Okay.
So, they finally made it through.
Did he get lost in a paper bag and die?
No, but close. So,
Oh, God.
So, there were springs on the other side of the desert, and they rested there for several days. So, they tried to rescue some wagons and cattle, and then they, consolidated the stuff that they did have into the remaining wagons. And then Charles Stanton and William McCutcheon were sent ahead to Sutter's Fort in California to get supplies. And so, if we can go to the next slide, this is just, I need visuals. They still had another 40 miles of desert and a valley next to the Ruby Mountains to get through before they could rejoin the traditional trail. So they had to go through, this. So,
Nice.
They made it through here with ease, especially compared to the rest of the trip. And then they were finally able to rejoin the California Trail. Their shortcut had delayed them by about a month.
Nice.
Yeah.
Shortcut my
ass. So, yeah. So, just to recap real quick, a couple of people have died. We've lost 2 able-bodied men to go look ahead for supplies. A good chunk of the livestock is gone. A lot of the wagons are gone. And people are just they're hanging on by a thread here. Okay, so, they got back on the trail. Almost immediately...
all those wives were sitting in the wagon going, I should have listened to my mother when she told me this man was a bad idea.
No, literally, okay, so... While they were going through, it's not quite that, but going through, I don't remember which part of the trail, but Tamsin Donner audibly said, basically, why did we listen to these men? It was something similar to that.
She's probably like, these men are idiots. My mama told me
Yeah.
these men were idiots.
There weren't nothing wrong with Springfield.
Yeah. So yeah, they got back on the trail. Almost immediately after, they ran into some, I believe it's Paiute is how you pronounce it. I'm not really sure. Native Americans who stole and shot a lot of their livestock.
Blows.
Because they were marauding white people. So why would they not do that? You know? So I don't blame, I'm not, I fully support this activity. It did not, it didn't help the Donners at all.
No,
so,
they're having a bad time, but also, it wasn't your land to begin with.
Exactly.
You,
you're interloping and bringing guns and disease with you. I'm not going to feel bad at you. I'm not going to feel bad for you for that. So at this point...
disease of manifest destiny.
Yeah. So at this point, it was well into October. And, they needed to get through the mountains fast. Because this usually started to snow in, mid to late November. And once it snowed, you couldn't go anywhere. So at that point, the Donner families, so George and Jacob and their families, they split off to try to make better time. While that happened, in the remaining group, some wagons got, tangled up. And in an attempt to untangle the wagons, John Snyder, who was one of the teamsters that had been hired by the Graves family, he got just insanely frustrated and angry. He's probably at his wit's end with all of this. He started beating one of the oxen that was tied up to one of the wagons. And so James Reed...
poor cows!
I know. James Reed owned that ox, and so Reed tried to intervene, and Snyder hit him with a whip handle.
Jesus Christ.
At that point, Reed's wife tried to intervene, and Reed's wife was, famously frail. She had to get married in bed because she couldn't stand up. So,
You can fucking get married, girl, just saying.
Yeah, and so she tried to intervene, and then Snyder hit her. So Reed then stabbed Snyder in the collarbone, which killed him. So...
I'm not saying he deserved it.
I'm not either. Tempers were high. That's all I'm going to say. Everybody was very stressed out. Everyone could have handled things differently, but they didn't, so this is what we were left with.
Yes.
So that night, the group tried to decide what to do with Reed, because even if it was in self-defense, they didn't feel comfortable having him in the group anymore, because one, he killed the dude.
And also, weren't they super pissed at him anyway?
Yes, they were super pissed at him anyway, so they were kind of looking for a reason to kick him out. So, you're in the middle of nowhere in Mexican territory. U.S. law didn't apply, and wagon trains often, did their own thing when it came to the law. On top of that...
Can you imagine a show on, whatever, all those trashy, law show, Judge Judy style, but it's wagon train law?
Yes.
I would
watch shit out of that.
Kickstarter.
Yes. So, and then remember, George Donner was technically, their leader, but he was a full day ahead of the rest of them. So they just kind of figured it out on their own. So everyone had seen Snyder hit Reed. But they liked Snyder, and they didn't like Reed, so that didn't really work out very well for him. So, Louis Kaysberg suggested that Reed be hanged, but they eventually compromised and ended up banishing Reed from the group. So, the next morning, he was sent alone and unarmed into the wilderness, but his stepdaughter, Virginia, secretly rode ahead and gave him a shotgun and some food.
What a nice stepdaughter.
Yeah. So, at this point, as I have said, everyone's sanity is hanging on by, a spider web's width of a thread. They are barely hanging in there. So, grass was becoming pretty scarce, and the animals were weakening, which meant that literally everyone had to walk. Kaysberg ejected Hardcoop the Belgian from his wagon, saying that he had to walk or die. So, he literally said walk or die. Kaysberg is he's a character. We'll get more into him later.
The Belgian.
Yeah, Hardcoop was nearly 70. And so after a few days of walking, he sat down and basically was like, I can't walk anymore, because his feet were so swollen that they had split open. And...
Oh, God, don't tell me that. I don't want to know.
Yeah, so he sat down while everybody else went ahead, and then he was never able to catch back up. William Eddy begged with the others to go back and find him, but everyone refused, saying they didn't want to waste resources on a 70-year-old man.
Okay, you dicks. I'm glad you die in the mountains now.
That's a good first look into how things are going to go when they get snowed in. At this point, it is starting to turn into every family for themselves. And that is very much the mentality later on. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So, that's not right. He had already got kicked out. Right, the Reeds. Sorry, I put Reed and Heron, but Reed had already been kicked out. The Reed family, like his family was allowed to stay. It was just him. They were still with some of their Teamsters. So basically everybody eventually caught up with the Donners. So at this point, some local Native Americans again noticed the group and the trouble they were having and began stealing and shooting horses and cattle. They lost nearly 100 heads of livestock and several wagons. At one point, I think he was German, the German man Wolfinger stopped to bury what was left of his wagon, and Reinhardt and Spitzer helped. So basically, he was going to cache it, or cache, however, I say cache. He was going to bury it.
It's cache.
That's what I thought. So he was basically going to bury it in case, if they ever came back, there may be supplies in there, you know? So him and Reinhardt and Spitzer stopped to bury it. Reinhardt and Spitzer returned without him.
Oh my god.
They claimed that they had been attacked by Native Americans and he had been killed. Members of the Donner Party suspected that that was a lie and that Reinhardt and Spitzer had killed him, but I couldn't find an explanation as to why, so I don't know which one is true.
So they could get his shit, that's why.
Yeah, I don't know.
But here's another case for my wagon train justice.
Yeah. Yeah, at that point, they gave a plausible enough story that people just kind of let it slide, but in the back of their minds, they were like, was it the natives or was it you guys? You know, but like, what are they going to do? So, the Eddy family had lost all of their cattle and were forced to abandon their wagon and walk, and the remaining Reeds were in the same position. The other families refused to help, any of them. So, they finally got to the Truckee River, but they couldn't rest for too long because they still had to go through the Sierra Nevada. They were still in the desert at this point. So Charles Stanton, who remember earlier, he had gone on ahead with William McCutcheon to California to get supplies. Yes. Stanton had come back and found them all. William McCutcheon had to stay behind for, I don't actually know why, I just know that he did. I don't know if he got sick or he got delayed or what it was, but he had to stay behind. He brought back mules, food, and 2 Native Americans named Louise and Salvador. It is unknown whether those 2 were there willingly or whether they had been forced into the job. They may have been enslaved by the guy who owned Sutter's Fort, which is the town that Stanton had come from. But we don't know.
I hate this story. The more you talk,
I know.
The more I know like the very basics
I
about
know,
this because I think everyone just knows.
I think everyone knows the
like,
basics. Yeah, it's a
going
lot.
Through this, I'm like,
it's a lot worse than.
I hate this.
Oh, it gets even worse.
They all die.
Oh, just wait, it just gets even worse. So Stanton also told. Oh, I know I said that earlier. So Stanton also told the party that Reed and his teamster were alive in Sutter's Fort. So Reed had made it to Sutter's Fort and was waiting there for his family to get there. So they still had to get over the Sierra Nevadas. So if you can go to 18, these are the Sierra Nevadas. Also very sheer. Also very, it's mountainy. I don't know how else to explain it. And these were described as being, quote, much worse than the Wasatch. And they had such a difficult time going through the Wasatch. So the good part was, though, they had an established trail to go through the Sierras. Right? Because at this point, they were back on the traditional trail. So they did have an established trail. So that was good. So they tried to decide if they wanted to rest or immediately start through the mountains. And so it was like October 20th or so. They thought that it wouldn't start snowing until the middle of November. So they figured they had about a month to make it through.
You don't.
Yeah, they don't. So while they were still deciding, William Pike, who was one of the Murphys, was killed accidentally. William Foster was loading a gun and it went off. So they had both married Murphy sisters, so they were the in-laws. And they had actually been friends, before this. They had been, shipmates or something. So that's actually really sad that he, accidentally killed his friend with a gun. But apparently that happened, fucking constantly. Guns accidentally going off while they were being loaded or cleaned back in the 1800s. So, what are you gonna do?
Point it away from camp, that's what
You'd
do.
think, but, what are you gonna do? So that kind of made the decision before them. And they were so one by one, they all decided to leave. But it began to snow that week. In October.
Wow, surprise!
Because winter came a month early that year. Only that year, but So.
No. That's not how winter works. It probably did that all the time. You get random snowstorms all the time. I remember trick-or-treating one year in snow pants because there was a foot of snow outside.
It snowed on Halloween in Chicago a couple years ago. Like,
Yeah,
it happens. I mean, winter came early and that the snow came early. You know what I mean?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
We trick-or-treated, and then, it snowed the rest of the year.
Yeah. Either way, it snowed before they thought it was supposed to. So, they made it to Truckee Lake, which is now called Donner Lake. So, if you can go to slide 19, that's the lake and the area around it. So,
it's pretty.
It is. It's very pretty. So,
it's also very mountainous.
Yeah. They had to go up a nearly vertical 1,000-foot slope to get up there.
Oh my god.
So.
That's a hard pass.
Yeah.
So. I'm sweating on their behalf.
I know. So the Breen family made it first and found a few cabins that had been built about 2 years previously by other pioneers. So they camped out near the cabin. The Eddies and Kaysbergs joined them and attempted to make it through the pass because they had to get through a pass to get out of the mountains. But they found snow drifts that were up to 10 feet high. So they went back.
Yep.
Within a day, all of the families except the Donners were at the camp. The Donners were about 5 miles below them, about half a day's trip at Alder Creek. So they were like nearby, but not like really nearby. And then on the evening of November 4th, it began to snow again and snowed for the next 8 days straight. So at this point, there were about 60 people snowed in at the main camp. So there are 3 cabins. And so if you go to slide 20, this is an illustration of what the scene would have looked like. They're tiny one-room pine cabins. And 60 people were in 3 of them. So the Breens...
Smell.
They talk about that later. So the Breen family took up an entire cabin on their own. The Eddies and the Murphys were in one cabin. The Reeds and the Graves were in a third. Kaysberg built a lean-to against the side of the Breen cabin for his family. So the cabins were made of pine logs and had dirt floors, leaky roofs, and no windows. So of the people at the main camp, 19 were men over the age of 18, 12 were women, and 29 were children, 6 of whom were toddlers or younger. So further down with the Donners, there were 21 people, including Mrs. Wolfinger and her children. They just had to make tents. They didn't have cabins. They just had tents. So by the time everyone got settled, they were nearly out of food. What remained of their livestock began to die because there was no food or water and it was fucking freezing. And they stacked the carcasses outside, which those froze just for being outside. So they did have food available for a while. The lake wasn't frozen yet, but they either didn't know that there were fish in it or they were just unsuccessful at catching any. The way it was phrased in one of the sources was they didn't know how to fish for lake trout. And I'm like, I don't know enough about fishing, but that doesn't seem that different than regular fishing, and I'm sure they knew how to do that, so I don't know the context there, but they didn't catch any fish.
I don't know. Maybe there was, like, some ice and they were...
Maybe. I don't know. At one point, Eddie was able to kill a bear, so they got a lot of meat off of that.
Shit.
I know. Yeah. Well,
we don't know how to fish, but I killed a bear.
killed a bear! Well, that was
Don't
something...
worry, guys.
In Different Stars Above, so they talk about, like, he focuses on Sarah Graves Fosdick, so they talk about, like, their life before the trip, and her father killed, like, multiple bears. People just killed bears constantly, apparently.
Were bears smaller back then?
No, but I think they were more prevalent.
Have you seen The Revenant?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
No, I think there were just a lot more of them. And it was
Yeah.
still very wildernessy where a lot of these people were living. So,
Yes.
then there was another huge snowstorm, and that killed the rest of the cattle. And then it buried them all under several feet of snow, so they couldn't find them, so they couldn't eat them.
Oh.
Yeah. Patrick
Would you
Breen,
remember where you put them?
they couldn't, even if they could, they couldn't get to them. It was 10 feet of snow.
Okay, I guess.
Like, you have to dig down 10 feet, try to cut up a frozen cow carcass, and then haul it back up another 10 feet. And they were already malnourished and weak and tired. So. So, yeah.
And I don't know if you have ever done, like, work in the snow, but, God, it's exhausting.
It is. It is exhausting. Which, that was something it's going to get brought up later, too. Keep in mind, they had also had to forge their own trail through mountains, so they were already wiped out by the time they got here. So that really didn't help. Especially the men, which we'll get into that later.
Yeah, and this little, like, chateau vacation that they're on is not...
No. So, Patrick Breen began keeping a diary on November 20th, and that is actually the only, like, written first-hand account of what happened at the camp. So he described the weather and life at the camp. For a while, he got like scary religious as well, because I think he was like panicking. So this is a quote from Wikipedia that's just summing up like the contents of the diary and how these people had to live. Excuse me. The cabins were cramped and filthy, and it snowed so much that people were unable to go outdoors for days. Diets soon consisted of oxhide, strips of which were boiled to make a disagreeable glue-like jelly. And also oxhides, they had used those to patch the holes in the roof. So it was like, do we want to get snowed on or do we want to eat? And so ox and horse bones were boiled repeatedly to make soup, and they became so brittle that they would crumble upon chewing. Sometimes they were softened by being charred and eaten. Bit by bit, the Murphy children picked apart the oxhide rug that lay in front of their fireplace, roasted it in the fire, and ate it. So they were...
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. They had several unsuccessful attempts to leave to get help. They tried multiple times. They just couldn't make it through. And then Spitzer and one of the teamsters for the Reeds ended up dying fairly quickly. So they eventually got so desperate that they tried one last time to send out a party to get help. And that is the snowshoe trip. I can't say snowshoes, so this is going to be fun. So if you go to...
Oh boy,
here we go. So if you go to slide 21, these are just illustrations. Obviously, we don't have photos. These are illustrations that were made later on. So, Franklin Graves made snowshoes. I can do it if I think about it and say it slowly.
Why can't you say that word?
I don't know. It's Allie can't
like,
say.
What do you?
I keep wanting to say. I keep wanting to say snowshoes. I'm wanting to put an H in front of snow. I don't know. Allie can't say sorority.
I don't understand. That makes it more difficult to say.
I'm aware. That's why I'm annoyed that my brain wants to do that. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's an instinct. It's not a good one, but what are you gonna do? So, Franklin Graves.
Sorry, I'm thinking about it from like a linguistic standpoint.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm thinking it of it. My brain is stupid standpoint.
Yeah.
Like,
well, from a linguistic standpoint, your brain is stupid.
I know it is.
Yeah, because I agree with Shelby because that's a very unnatural sound to put in.
I'm aware. I don't know. That's
and
just
like
what my...
the way your articulators have to...
That's just what it wants to do. So, they made snowshoes out of ox bones and hide, or like what little they had left that they hadn't eaten. So, on December 16th, so they'd been here for like 2 months. They tried multiple times to get out. They just couldn't. They eventually got desperate enough. They sent out this other group. A party of 17 people left the camp. The youngest was 10. The oldest was 57. So, I didn't put all their ages, but these are the people who left. So it was Antonio, who was that random shepherd who had joined them early on. He was still alive. They brought...
Go, Antonio.
Yeah, they brought Luis and Salvador, the Native Americans who were probably enslaved. Charles Berger, who I think was a teamster. Patrick Dolan, who I think was a teamster. William Eddy, Jay and Sarah Fosdick, and Sarah, again, was one of the Graves children, and she had actually got married to Jay right before they left Illinois, which they talk about that in the beginning of the book. It was a really hard decision for her because she was engaged, and so she was like, and his father didn't want him to leave because he was the only, like, able-bodied man, and he had a farm. And so he was like, if you leave, I won't be able to do the farm, basically. And so she was like, do I leave my fiancé or my entire giant family? So they ended up just getting married so that Jay's father couldn't do anything about it. So there was also William and Sarah Foster, and Sarah was a Murphy. There was Franklin Graves and his daughter Mary Ann. There was Lemuel, I think, Murphy, who was 12. William Murphy, who was 10. Amanda McCutcheon, who her husband was William McCutcheon, who had gone ahead with Charles Stanton and was still in Sutter's Fort. There was Harriet Pike. Yes.
Didn't they have weren't they the ones that had a baby?
They did. It may have died by this point.
I was going to say, where's the baby?
I think it may have died by this point.
Oh, that's
I don't remember if the baby survives or not. Honestly, I don't remember. We will get into that later when I list who all died and who didn't. So there's also Harriet Pike, who was a Murphy. Her husband, William, had been the one who had been killed by the gun going off accidentally. And then rounding off the group was Charles Stanton. So they took 6 days worth of rations, a blanket each, and hunting equipment, and set off for Bear Valley, which was just another...
It's not a place.
It was just another outpost. And so a later historian called the party the Forlorn Hope, which is why it says that in the caption of that photo. So Charles, and remember, they had only made they hadn't made enough snowshoes for everybody. So Charles Berger and William Murphy didn't have any snowshoes, and they gave up and turned back pretty early on. So now we're down to 15 pretty much immediately. The rest of the party made snowshoes out of a pack saddle for Lemuel Murphy, who again was 12 years old. It wasn't a great trip for obvious reasons. So they were all already really malnourished. They weren't used to hiking in snow, and the snow was 12 foot deep. So there's that, 12 feet deep, whatever.
Yeah, and those guys, I don't know, have either of you ever gone snowshoeing?
No. That is not an activity I wish to participate in.
It's really fun, I like it. When the snow is that deep and you don't have snowshoes on, you do just sink up to your chest or neck.
Yeah.
And that's it. You can't do anything.
I've been just in snow that goes up past my knees. So
I
assumed it was the same mechanic. You would just sink.
Yes, I understand that you know what snow is.
No, I didn't mean it in that way. I'm sorry.
When you're out in the woods
yes.
and you take your snowshoes off, you sink up to your chest.
Yes. Yeah, so they were hiking in handmade snowshoes. By the third day, many of them were snowblind.
Oh my god, that's so bad.
For people who don't know what this is, because I know it means you can't really see, but I didn't know what it was. So basically, the light reflecting off the snow gives your corneas a sunburn. Basically. So they also couldn't see. On the 6th day, Eddie discovered that his wife had hidden some bear meat in his pack, so that helped out a little bit. Charles Stanton ended up falling behind on December 21st, so, 5 days in? Yeah, 5 days in, and his remains were found the following year. Remember that they only brought enough food for 6 days. So they ran out of food. And then they made it another 2 days before someone suggested cannibalism. So this is the first time that anyone in the Donner Party even discussed cannibalism. It wasn't back at the camp. It was on this trip. So the person who suggested it, it was Patrick Dolan, who again I think was one of the Teamsters. He proposed one of them should volunteer to die in order to feed the others, but he did not volunteer.
Then why
That's
make the suggestion?
Exactly!
Not how that works.
Why would you suggest that, but not volunteer?
See, I am well aware that if I was ever in a situation where we had to
We've had this conversation before.
We've had this conversation. You would die in the parking lot. We'd eat you before we
Exactly. I will suggest it, and I will be like, here, let me just slit my throat real fast. You guys.
And we'll be like, but Shelby, there's a food court.
Right there.
You can make it, girl.
There's popcorn.
Yeah.
You're gonna make it.
You can have some nachos with plastic cheese.
You'll be fine. Okay. Yeah. So, Patrick Dolan suggested this. The rest of the group didn't agree with that suggestion, but they did suggest a duel or a lottery. William Eddy, he kept his moral high ground as long as he possibly could. He suggested that they just keep going until someone fell, but a blizzard forced them to stop, so they super couldn't do that. So, right after they got stopped by the snow, Antonio and Franklin Graves both died.
They were like, good.
They didn't eat them yet. As the blizzard continued, Patrick Dolan began to suffer from hypothermia. So he ranted, stripped, and ran off into the woods. Because that's what you do when you have hypothermia. It's paradoxical undressing.
It is freaking crazy.
I know.
I mean, I don't love it. It's terrible. But, it's also really funny.
Yeah, he came back fairly quickly, but then died a few hours later. Not long after that, they realized that Lemuel Murphy, who again was 12, was about to die.
Oh, God.
And possibly because of this, they decided to begin eating Dolan. They did start with Dolan, the one who suggested the whole thing. Murphy still ended up dying anyway. So the next morning, the group stripped meat from the bodies of Antonio, Dolan, Graves, and Murphy. They separated...
Oh, wait, Antonio died?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I'd said that. Yeah, he died.
I was rooting for Antonio. I must not have heard.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah. They tried to ensure that no one would be eating their relatives, because there were relatives of Franklin Graves and Lemuel Murphy in the group. Eddie held out for as long as he could, but eventually he also ate human flesh. Louise and Salvador refused to do it. They absolutely fucking refused. And so they were Native American. I believe they were, I should have looked up. I think it's Paiute. Again, I should have looked up. I believe it was something within, it was like a cultural or religious reason that they refused to eat human flesh. I don't know the actual reason, but they flat out refused. So they rested for a few days and started again. They started taking apart the snowshoes so that they could eat the oxhide webbing. And then they discussed killing Louise and Salvador for food, but Eddie warned them and they quietly left the group. And so this is the part where you super lose sympathy, because these men were they were brought back to help them, but they literally just saw them as meat because they were Native American and they were not human. It's fucking disgusting. So
I hate that.
Yeah. So a little bit after that, Jay Fosdick died, and they did use his body for food as well. So at this point, there were only 7 left of the 17. 2 had gone back, and then the rest had all died. So after several more days, they came across Salvador and Louise. They hadn't eaten in about 9 days, and they were close to death. William Foster shot them, believing that they were their last option for food. They were the only 2 people who were actively killed to be used as food in this trip. Or in the Donners at all. They were the only 2 that are... There's one that maybe, but we're pretty sure no, but we'll get to that later on. They were the only 2 who were actively killed for food.
Not okay with that.
Yeah. So... On top of that, they could have not killed them and they would have been fine, because a few days later, they found a Native American settlement who gave them food. So, yeah, they stumbled onto a Native American settlement. They all looked so scary that the inhabitants initially fled their settlement.
Holy shit.
Like, that's how terrifying these people looked.
I bet they looked like walking skeletons.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they gave them what food they could, because, it's also winter for them. They need to conserve as much as they can as well. Eddie and a few Native Americans from the settlement left to go get help. They found a ranch in a small farming town on the edge of the Sacramento Valley. So a rescue party went back and found the other 6 survivors on January 17th. Their trip had taken 33 days. So, at that point, now people knew that they needed help. So, we are going to go back to Reed for a second. So, Reed had actually made it to Sutter's Fort in October, and he tried to mount a rescue party, immediately, because he knew that they were fucked. And he didn't even know they'd been snowed in yet. He just knew they were going to get stuck. So, if you can go to slide 22, this is another map that shows the different routes. So, this one includes Sutter's Fort. It's the point on the very far left, and then the lake they were at is, a tiny bit to the right. I just wanted to show you the distance that they had to go. Miles-wise, it's not that far, but they still had to go through, mountains and shit, so it was pretty far.
Yeah.
So, Reed was in Sutter's Fort. He begged... So, do you guys know who John C. Fremont is?
No.
Okay.
I know the name. But...
Yeah, you probably do. So, he was this explorer, military guy, politician who was, I don't want to say popular. He's really well known at the time, and he was fighting in the Mexican-American War. He happened to be in Sutter's Fort as well. Reed begged John C. Fremont to gather up a team for him to bring people back. And in return, Reed promised to join Fremont and fight in the Mexican-American War. So
Gotcha.
He joined up with McCutcheon, who was still in Sutter's Fort, and some travelers from the Harlan Young Party, and attempted to find the Donner Party, but they were unable to locate them before they got snowed in. So they tried before the snow even hit to go in and get them. They just couldn't find them. And again, the Harlan Young train had actually made it to Sutter's Fort on October 8th, and they were the last group to make it over the Sierra Nevada that season. I don't know the details on their group. I know people died, but it wasn't nearly to the extent of the Donner Party. And I don't think it was even that different than, a normal wagon train. So, I just want to put that into perspective. So, after Eddie made it out, he also attempted to mount a rescue party. But the military was kind of busy at the moment, and they had taken most of the able-bodied men with them. So, only 3 men responded to an initial call for volunteers. So, they were kind of screwed on that. Reed ended up in San Jose for some reason. It was just California was chaos at this point because there were like roving bands of rebels and the Mexican army and the American army. It was chaos. He ended up in San Jose, and he was able to get the word out. So the people of San Jose started a petition to appeal to the U.S. Navy for help, which did not work. Two local newspapers purposely reported that the snowshoe party had resorted to cannibalism, which helped foster sympathy for those who were still trapped, which is interesting, I think. But it fostered sympathy because they were like, oh my God, they must be so desperate if they had to go through that, right?
Right, yeah.
And then on top of that, residents of Yerba Buena, many of whom were recent immigrants themselves, raised $1,300 and organized relief efforts, and that's equal to $36,100 in 2020. So not a small amount of money. And then so they had a rescue team by February 4th, so it took them about 3 weeks. And then Eddie stayed behind in Bear Valley while the rescue team went on ahead. So the rescue party finally left on February 4th. They were immediately delayed by rain, because of fucking course they were. They left food caches along the way. They reached Fremont Pass, which is now called Donner Pass, on February 18th. And that was the pass that they had needed to get through to, like, get through the mountains before they got snowed in, but they couldn't because they got hit by snow too early. As they neared where Eddie had told them the cabins would be, they started, like, calling out and shouting to let the people know that they were there. Mrs. Murphy heard them, just came out of a hole in the snow like a gopher, and said, "Are you men from California, or do you come from heaven?" All of the cabins had been completely buried in snow. The oxide roofs had begun to rot, and 13 people had died at the main camp. They had still not resorted to cannibalism at this point, though. I will point that out. So this is a quote from Wikipedia. Leanna Donner, who was one of the daughters, had particular difficulty walking up the steep incline from Alder Creek to Truckee Lake. Later writing, "Such pain and misery as I endured that day is beyond description. George Donner's arm was so gangrenous he could not move. 23 people were chosen to go with the rescue party, leaving 21 in the cabins at Truckee Lake and 12 at Alder Creek. They literally couldn't bring back everybody at once. They didn't have the supplies. They just couldn't do it. They didn't tell anyone at the camp what had happened to the snowshoe party. They just said that they couldn't come back due to frostbite. I think that they were worried that they would cause them...
give them ideas?
No, I think they were more worried that it would, like, dishearten the people at the camp to know what had happened. You know, they wanted them to hold out hope that they could make it out. So while they were trying to leave, 2 of the Reed children were too frail to continue and had to be sent back. When they got there, the fucking Brains flat out refused to let them into their cabin. Would not let them in.
Oh my gosh.
But one of the rescuers gave them extra food, so they very grudgingly let them in. Because they're still doing the my family first mentality. As they continued, they discovered that animals had gotten into the first food cache, so they didn't have supplies for 4 days.
Oh my god.
Awesome.
2 people from the camp, one of whom was a toddler, died en route. And then Jacob Donner's stepson fatally gorged himself on food when they made it to Bear Valley. Like, he broke into the storeroom and ate so much food that it killed him. And
that can happen if you're starving and you eat too much protein. Your body cannot process it.
You're supposed to be, like, refed, basically. It's a whole process you're supposed to go through. Obviously, they were not aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we did with the kitten that we found. Because she was, like, ravenous and would have eaten, like, the entire thing. We were like, small doses of food, okay?
Do you want to know what the example... Do you want to know what the example I was about to use?
I know exactly what the example is that you were about to use.
Holocaust survivors.
Yep. I fucking knew it.
People from concentration camps had to be refed. I'm not laughing at that.
Going, Shannon, I know you so well.
Yeah.
I mean, my immediate thought was people with eating disorders.
That too, yeah.
Because that's
Shannon
what I have.
Laughing at Holocaust
knowledge
survivors.
I'm not laughing at Holocaust survivors.
She's laughing at the fact that Hannah knew exactly what she
that
thought.
too, and just the very different examples we came up with.
I chose the cute one,
the
okay?
Holocaust.
Yeah, I chose the historical one. What a shock. So Jacob Donner's stepson ate too much food and died. The rest of them continued on to Sutter's Fort. So, while this first rescue party was still being organized, so back in, like, February, A nearby settler named George C. Yount heard about the Donner Party and began having distressing dreams of a struggling group of starving pioneers in the snow. And he was so affected by these dreams that he and a few others raised $500 to send out another rescue party. So the second relief party reached Truckee Lake on March 1st. So probably like between 2 weeks and a month after the first group got there and left. So this group contained several people who actually knew how to live in the mountains and in the wilderness, which was good. Reed and McCutcheon also went back. So, because Reed's kids were still there. So, he super wanted to go back. They found the Breens in relatively good condition. The Murphy cabin was a different story. So, this is a quote from Wikipedia. Lavina Murphy was caring for her 8-year-old son Simon and the 2 young children of William Eddy and Foster. She had deteriorated mentally and was nearly blind. The children were listless and had not been cleaned in days, and Louis Kaysberg had moved into the cabin, and he could barely move due to an injured leg. And so it was between the 2 rescue missions that those at the camps resorted to cannibalism. So this is all a quote from Wikipedia as well. No one at Truckee Lake had died during the interim between the departure of the first and arrival of the second relief party. Patrick Breen did document a disturbing visit in the last week of February from Mrs. Murphy, who said her family was considering eating Milt Elliott, who he was one of the Teamsters. Reed and McCutcheon later found Elliott's mutilated body. So, he probably...
That might be a murder?
No. He just died. But he died, and they did this, like, the day before the rescue party got there. Their timing with all of these is just horrible. Yeah, the Alder Creek camp fared no better. The first 2 members of the relief party to reach it saw Trudeau carrying a human leg. When they made their presence known, he threw it in a hole in the snow that contained the mostly dismembered body of Jacob Donner. He was basically, like, I hate, this image is in my head and I fucking hate it. He's carrying it around like a fucking, like, turkey drumstick, basically.
Oh,
That's what's in my head. I hate it. I had to make other people hear it too. I'm sorry. So.
Shannon. Fuck you.
I'm sorry. So Jacob Donner has died and has been dismembered. Inside their tent, Elizabeth Donner refused to eat, although her children were being nourished by their father's organs. That is a Wikipedia sentence, not mine.
Oh, God.
Yeah, the rescuers discovered 3 other bodies had already been consumed. In the other tent, Tamsin Donner was well, but George was very ill because that infection that he had reached his shoulder. So this time, 17 migrants were rescued from Truckee Lake, leaving only 5 behind. So we had Kaysberg, Mrs. Murphy, her son Simon, and the Eddy and Foster children. So there's 1 Eddy kid and 1 foster kid. Tamsin Donner decided to stay at Alder Creek with her husband and 3 of her daughters because her husband couldn't travel. They were all told that a 3rd rescue party would come for them soon. Which, like, it did, but... So, the trip back was super slow. They got stuck in yet another blizzard. 5-year-old Isaac Donner froze to death. Mary Donner's feet were burned. They were so frostbitten that she didn't realize she was sleeping with them in the fire. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I told you this one's rough, dude.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
No.
When the storm finally passed, the Breens and the Graves were too despondent to continue, and the relief party had no choice but to leave them behind. So that site became known as the Starving Camp. Margaret Breen tried to take the initiative to keep everyone alive, but Elizabeth Graves and her son Franklin died fairly quickly, and the rest of the party resorted to cannibalism to survive. So back at the main camp, 3 members of the rescue party have been left behind to assist those who remained. And there were maybe like 10 people left behind. Okay. 2 of these rescue team members basically conned Tamsin Donner out of money by promising to take her children to California. But they actually only took them to Truckee Lake. Like I think she paid them because her kids were still there. These 2 rescue members went up to Tamsin Donner and were like, hey, if you give us money, we will get your kids to California, like, right now. And she was like, okay, cool, let's do it. She gave them, like, $500. They only took them to the next camp with the Murphys and Kaysberg. And then they continued on to California themselves.
what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So, while this rescue team was still going back, the second one, William Foster and William Eddy started from Bear Valley because, remember, their kids were both still back at the camp. They brought a man with them named John Stark. So they were able to intercept Reed, and, you know, they were desperate to save their own children, so they persuaded 4 men, including Stark, to go to Truckee Lake with them. So this is a quote from Wikipedia. During their journey, they found the 11 survivors at Starved Camp, huddled around a fire that had sunk into a pit. The relief party split, with Foster, Eddy, and 2 others headed toward Truckee Lake. 2 of the rescuers, hoping to save some of the survivors, each took a child and headed back to Bear Valley. John Stark refused to leave the others. He picked up 2 children and all the provisions and assisted the remaining Breens and Graves to safety, sometimes advancing the children down the trail piecemeal, putting them down, and then going back to carry the other debilitated children. So this one dude saved like 10 people.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, while carrying all the provisions. Foster and Eddy made it to Truckee Lake on March 14th, so this was about 2 weeks after the second group got there. They unfortunately found that both of their children had died. This part's gross, and it's going to piss you off. I'm just warning you now. This is a quote from Wikipedia. Kaysberg told Eddy that he had eaten the remains of Eddy's son.
What?
Why?
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Because Kaysberg
Why would you do that?
was a... I don't even have words for what Kaysberg was.
Why wouldn't you just go with that shame to your grave?
Why? Because Kaysberg was crazy. Eddy then swore to murder Kaysberg if they ever met in California, because duh. So...
If he had said that to me about my kid, I would have killed him right there.
Yeah, I may be making this up. I feel like people had to hold him back from killing Kaysberg.
Can imagine that they would have to, yes.
Yeah. So the rest of this is also a quote from Wikipedia. George Donner and one of Jacob Donner's children were still alive at Alder Creek. Tamsin Donner had just arrived at the Murphy cabin to see her daughters because she had just found out that they were actually only right there. And so at this point, she could have walked out alone, but she chose to return to her husband, even though she was informed that no other relief party was likely to be coming soon. Foster and Eddy and the rest of the third relief left with the Donner girls, Simon Murphy, who was 8 years old, Trudeau, and Clark, and he was one of the Teamsters.
Maybe don't let Trudeau go with anybody just because of the...
the Turkey Lake.
What we just saw him doing.
Yeah. Lavina Murphy was too weak to leave, and Kaysberg refused. I don't know why Kaysberg refused, but he did. So back at the camps, there was now George and Tamsin Donner and Lavina Murphy and Kaysberg, and that was it. So in the intervening weeks, they tried to organize 2 more relief parties, but they turned back before getting to Bear Valley for various reasons. So this is a quote from Wikipedia. On April 10th, the local Mexican government near Sutter's Fort organized a salvage mission to try to recover the Donner's belongings. So they did this because they wanted to give the Donner children money. It wasn't because they were like, well, they're all dead, let's go get their shit. Like, that wasn't it. Like, they wanted to sell the stuff off so that the proceeds could be used to support the Donner children, who were all orphaned. All of them were orphaned. Yeah. So, this is a quote. The salvage party found the Alder Creek tents empty except for the body of George Donner, who had died only days before. On their way to Truckee Lake, they found Louis Kaysberg alive. According to him, Mrs. Murphy had died a week after the departure of Third Relief, and that's probably true. And remember, about probably like 5 or 6 weeks had passed in the intervening time here. Some weeks after that, Tamsin Donner had arrived at his cabin on her way over the pass, soaked and visibly upset. Kaysberg said he put a blanket around her and told her to start out in the morning, but she died during the night. The salvage party were suspicious of Kaysberg's story and found a pot full of human flesh in the cabin, along with George Donner's pistols, jewelry, and $250 in gold. This is the one that they think may have...
I think that Kaysberg stayed back because he was enjoying himself.
Yeah, that's kind of the popular theory.
I feel like he was a monster,
yeah.
And this was just his, like, excuse to be a monster.
Yeah, kind of. He has a really shitty life later, if that makes you feel any better. Yes. So the relief party, like, threatened to lynch Kaysberg. He claimed that Tamsin had come to him with all this stuff, like the pistols, the jewelry, and the money, and that she had asked Kaysberg to go and cash it for the kids, which doesn't really make sense because as far as they knew, no one was coming back, but that was what he said. And that was what they accepted. They dragged Kaysberg out of the camp. He still wanted to stay there. They forced him to leave. So,
anyway, monster.
yeah.
Okay.
So at this point, everyone in the Donner Party had either died or been rescued. So, we are done with all that now. News spread back east about all of this thanks to Samuel Brennan, who was a Mormon elder and journalist. Accounts first reached New York in July of 1847, so only a few months later. It was widely reported in newspapers, but the cannibalism angle was really hyped up and was greatly exaggerated because it was that era of sensationalist news.
Yes.
Like, a lot of the papers were like, a lot of them said that they flat out were killing each other for food, which was not true on the whole. And then there were some that were like, they were gathered around a fire, joyfully eating their father. And it's like, no, that wasn't even remotely what happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, in late June 1847, members of the Mormon Battalion under General Stephen Kearney went back to the cabins. So, if you go to slide 23, so that picture on the left, it's not of those cabins specifically, but it just shows you how high the snow can get. And then the picture on the right, so it's kind of hard to see just because of the way the photo is. So you see that guy sitting down. That tree next to him only goes up like halfway up the picture, right? It's a stump. And the ones next to it are also stumps. That's how high the snow was.
Wow.
Yeah. When the Donner Party was there.
When you go places, especially like national parks, there will be just like these random metal stakes in the ground, and they're like that tall. And it just shows you the previous year's snowfall.
Yeah.
And they're crazy
Yeah.
high.
Yeah.
Also, Pep is at my door screaming, so sorry for all of the noise.
That's okay.
This has been ASMR.
That's okay. So, so this battalion, they buried the human remains that remained and partially burned 2 of the cabins to, like, get rid of them. They did this to drum up good PR for California. They weren't doing it, like, I'm sure part of it was we want to give these people a respectful burial, but this really didn't look good for traveling to California.
Yeah.
So they wanted to erase it, basically. And then people who went through the area over the next few years reported finding bones and, like, other artifacts over the years. So now we're going to go through, like, the survivors and how they lived the rest of their lives the best I could find out. We're almost done, I promise. So Lansford Hastings, he received death threats after all of this because fucking duh.
Sorry, but like, MAP jail. You need to go to MAP jail.
I tried to look into this and I couldn't find anything. I don't know why he wasn't sued for fraud or negligence or something. He wasn't, but I don't know why. It may have just been that the survivors were very much I don't want to think about it. They had that kind of mentality afterwards. That may have been it. I don't know why.
I mean, I feel like that would be me. I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm just
we're done.
Yeah.
It's like, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. He eventually, because remember, this is like 20 years before the Civil War, he became a Confederate major.
Nope.
And
not surprised.
He tried to go to Brazil to set up a colony for the Confederates, but he died on the way there. So
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, apparently the Confederacy tried to make colonies. Yeah, and he died en route to Brazil in probably a very uncomfortable manner. So of the 87 people who entered the Wasatch Mountains, 48 survived. The Reed and Breen families did not lose a single family member. They were the only ones. Everybody else lost at least one person. So both of the Donner families and the Graves were left orphaned and had lost many of the children. William Eddy had lost his entire family. And then most of the Murphy family had died. All of the single men had died, if I remember correctly. So a lot of people died. A few of the widowed women remarried within months of getting to California. I mean, 1, you can't really live as a single woman in that time. And 2, there weren't a whole lot of single women in California. So they were very attractive prospects there.
Wait, you only ate 2 people? Okay, yeah, you're marriage material.
Basically, yeah. So the Reed family ended up settling in San Jose, and 2 of the Donner children actually lived with them until they came of age. And then Reed ended up doing really well in the gold rush. So he ended up being very prosperous later on. Actually, just a few years later, because that really hit in 1849. William Eddy was the only survivor out of his family. He had survived the snowshoe expedition. I did it again. I said sha-sha. So he lost his wife and his 2 children during the ordeal. He did try to follow through on his promise to kill Kaysberg, but was dissuaded by James Reed and Edwin Bryant, who was that journalist I mentioned earlier. He remarried twice and had a few more children, and he ended up dying in Petaluma, California in 1859 at the age of 42. I don't know how. So the Murphy survived.
Wait.
Yes.
He was married 2 more times and then died and he was only 42.
He was only 28 when this happened.
That is so much shit to go through in a short life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think his first next marriage, I think
his second
wife. I know what I meant. His first marriage after this happened, I think that ended in divorce, if I remember correctly. Which is odd for the time.
I mean, he's probably got some
I don't know
trauma.
if it was his fault. I don't remember. I don't know. I didn't see. Either way, he died fairly young. So, the Murphy family, their survivors ended up in Marysville, California. This had been the largest group because they had the in-laws and some grandkids, and there were 7 kids. So, Harriet Murphy Pike was one of the survivors of the snowshoe expedition. Now I'm trying to say, like, snowshoe. Like, I'm trying to throw an L in there. I can feel it. So she had actually married William Pike in 1842 at the age of 14. I don't know how old William Pike was, but he was well older than 14. But she was only 16 when this all happened. And her husband was the one who'd been shot accidentally. So she had 2 children with her on the trip and 1 survived. She remarried in 1847, moved to Oregon in the 1860s, and died at the age of 46, not 1846.
She was 1800.
Yeah. She lived the longest. William Foster was a son-in-law of Lavina Murphy. He was married to Sarah Murphy. They both survived. They lost 1 child, and they actually accused Kaysberg of actively killing him for food, but that was never proven. They kind of just roamed around the West for a while, until he ended up dying of cancer in 1874 at age 58. Sarah Foster died at the age of 80 in 1906 and was buried at Fort Bragg. So the McCutcheons were mostly okay. I mean, William and Amanda both survived. Their daughter had died during the winter. They settled in Sonoma. And then Amanda died in childbirth in 1857 at the age of 35. A lot of these people died.
Imagine.
I know.
Go through all this shit and then you die having a baby.
I know. I know that at the time it was very common to die young. A lot of these people died really, really young. And it's just like, they went through all that, and then they still died really young. Like, ugh. So, the Breen family, they were one of the ones who hadn't lost a single family member. They ended up in San Juan Bautista, California, and they ended up running an inn. And this is a quote from Wikipedia. They became the anonymous subjects of J. Ross Brown's story about his severe discomfort upon learning that he was staying with alleged cannibals, printed in Harper's Magazine in 1862. Many of the survivors encountered similar reactions. Because, like, everyone knew that they had engaged in cannibalism. Literally everyone knew that. You know? So, kind of hard to hide that. So their youngest...
And did they, like, they didn't try to hide it
No.
from the rescuers, right? They were like,
No,
we
they didn't.
people and it sucked.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't, like, proud of it, obviously, but they were like, this is how we survived. Never talk to us about it ever again, basically, was how they tried to live their lives. So their youngest daughter had been only a year old during the winter of 1846 to 47, and she was the last survivor of the Donner Party. She died in 1935. So,
Oh,
Wow.
yeah, 90 years later.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
that's a long time.
jeez.
Yeah.
Really? Oh my
So,
God.
yeah. George and Tamsin Donner's children were taken in by an older couple near Sutter's Fort. Eliza Donner was only 3 when this all happened, and this is a quote from KQED. This is going to make you mad. Eliza Donner recalled being taunted by a stranger years after the disaster, who insisted that the Donner Party was responsible for its own misfortune, and who proclaimed that if he himself felt that the miserable wretches brought from starvation were not worth the price it had cost to save them.
What?
Why are people like that?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Just some random guy on the street just went up to figured out that she was Eliza Donner and went up and told her that. And she was 3.
Why?
I don't know.
Why?
Yeah, because she totally had control of her life as a 3-year-old.
Yeah. She doesn't even remember, like, she remembers being, like, fucking miserable, obviously. Because even at 3, like, that's gonna get imprinted in your brain. But she was like...
I didn't know that you were cold and hungry all the time.
Yeah, she was like, I actively know that I had to eat meat off of my dad, but I don't remember it. At least she did, you know? And then she actually later published an account of the Donner Party in 1911, drawing on printed accounts and her sister's recollections. That was, I think, the first, like, account that came from a survivor of the party. So, the surviving Graves children kind of scattered around, because there had been 9 of them. There were a lot of them. I don't remember, like, several of them died. I don't remember how many, and I did not write it down. But I have information on 4 of them. So, at least 4 of them survived. Sarah Graves Fosdick had lost her husband during the snowshoe expedition. I almost did it again. Expedition. So
I heard you that
yeah,
time.
she settled in the Napa Valley and was a school teacher for a little while. She married William Dill Ritchie in 1848, and he had actually assisted with the first relief party. So I'm assuming they knew each other from that, but I don't know for sure. They had 2 children.
That is the weirdest meeting.
I know! How did you meet Dad? We don't need to talk about that.
Do your homework.
Yeah.
Shut up.
So, he was caught in possession of stolen mules and was lynched in 1854.
Whoa.
That blows.
Yeah, so she remarried again in 1856 to... I just put Samuel. I didn't put his last name.
To Samuel.
Some guy named Sam. They had 4 children, and she ended up dying of heart disease at the age of 46 on March 28th, 1871. And, like, that may have been the results of just, like, this shit, you know? Like, permanently damaging her body.
Yeah, malnutrition.
Yeah, so...
will do that to you.
Yeah, this is what I mean, like, a lot of them died, like, super young. Mary Ann Graves also survived the snowshoe expedition. She was 19 at the time. She married a man named Edward Pyle, I got his last name, in 1847, but he was murdered.
Oh my god.
So, I know! So, this is a quote from Wikipedia. She cooked his killer's food while he was in prison to ensure the condemned man did not starve before his hanging, which I respect.
That is my level of petty
Yeah.
bitch.
One of Mary's
I want him to be well fed so his neck will snap
easy.
nicer.
Yeah. One of Mary's grandchildren noted that she was very serious, which, like, duh. And Graves once said, "I wish I could cry, but I cannot. If I could forget the tragedy, perhaps I would know how to cry again." Which is so fucking sad. So she did get remarried in 1851, and she died in 1891 at the age of 65. William Graves was one of the sons who survived. He was known as an eccentric later in life and had several different occupations. The subtext of that is because of trauma. So...
Well, I was just gonna say, I feel like if I lived back in the day, I would really want that to be my title.
Yeah.
Just some eccentric. Like, oh yeah, she's that weirdo who, like, lives up in that weird castle on the hill.
Basically,
and
yeah.
just does her own thing.
Yeah. And then Nancy Graves was 9 during the ordeal. Later on, her classmates recalled that she would often stop in the middle of playing and just burst into tears. Like, yeah. And then she was never able to recover from having to cannibalize her mother and her brother. And she never publicly acknowledged her involvement in anything ever. If they asked her about it, she just flat out refused to talk. Which, again, I do respect. Then there's Kaysberg.
Yes.
So, Louis Kaysberg.
God.
So, a lot of people accused him of murdering people for food. And then he was also, like, just kind of cuckoo, as we have discussed. KQED pointed this out. Like, he probably didn't kill Tamsin. There is no evidence that he did. But William Foster did murder 2 people, Louise and Salvador. Nobody cared about that.
I care.
No, I know, but, like, at the time, nobody cared.
know,
They only
yeah.
cared that he may have murdered the white lady for food. They didn't care if they murdered the natives for
that's what I
food.
was gonna say. That's why nobody cared, because they weren't white and they were probably enslaved, like you said.
Yeah. So he brought a defamation suit against people making this claim. He was awarded $1 in damages and had to pay court costs. So he technically won, but not really. And then he basically was just a pariah for the rest of his life. I will say, so Eliza Donner, who was one of Tamsin's children, found him later in life and like went to talk to him. And he was not mentally well for various, obvious reasons, but not like I don't want to say not in a bad way. He basically got down on his hands and knees and begged her to understand that he did not kill her mother. So that's what Eliza said. But that connotation never left him, and he was never able to escape that people thought that he killed someone to eat them. So, yeah. Didn't go well for him either. So we just got a little bit more. So just the legacy.
I'm not defending it.
No.
But at the time, he was not in a, like, proper state of mind.
No.
He seems to have been a little bit off.
He was kind of hot-headed to start with.
Let's
phrase it that way.
Sure, and I'm not saying that, like, it excuses anything that may or may not have happened. But there are many other factors that were involved.
Yeah, but the public isn't good at nuance, so...
No, not at all.
Yeah, so yeah, just the legacy of it. The cannibalism really gets hyped up, even though, like, overall, it's a very small part of the story.
Yeah.
Some other survivors claim they never cannibalized anybody, but most people believe that they did. We think that the Breens maybe didn't, but other than that, everyone did, and there's evidence to show that they did. So, those who did talk about it, the brief times that they did, were adamant that it was like the absolute extreme last resort. They had eaten literally everything they could before turning to their dead.
Carpet.
Yeah, they ate the carpet, they ate the roof, they ate literally everything.
They literally, like, ate the bones.
Yeah.
Until they disintegrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They cooked them and cooked them and cooked
them. Yeah, it was just...
And then ate them.
Yeah, just at the time, the sensationalist newspapers were like, they did this for fun! And it's like, they were like, no, we just didn't want to die. That's it. We were not happy about any of this. So, it gets hyped up a lot. I think the bigger part of the story is that white men were making maps through areas they'd never been through before and people died because of it. That's just me. But...
I mean, maybe.
Yeah. So the site of the cabins is actually now a California state park. So if you go to the last slide, I know, you can go camping at Donner Lake. Like, I know! I don't want to do that.
That's really morbid.
I know!
That feels disrespectful somehow.
Oh, just wait until what I'm about to say. So...
Oh, God.
So, like, there were a lot of dead bodies left behind. And so for years, they were like, where are all the dead bodies at? Because they said that they buried them. So they were like, where are they at? They might be underneath that monument that they put up.
No!
I know! Because they put the monument up, and then they thought about where the bodies were. And then they were like, oh shit, this is the only place we haven't looked. And we can't find them anywhere. So they think they might be under the monument.
Well, I guess it's a great...
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Just so, I don't know if this is necessarily a good that came out of it, but historians and other researchers have used this incident as a case study in survival. So they studied the fatalities to see what factors may affect survival in nutritionally deprived individuals. So, of the 15 members of the snowshoe party, 8 out of the 10 men died, but all 5 of the women survived. And so even just knowing that, you're like, that's weird, right? So this is a quote from Wikipedia. The survivors were on average 7.5 years younger than those who died. Children aged between 6 and 14 had a much higher survival rate than infants and children under the age of 6, of whom 62.5% died, including the son born to the Kaysbergs on the trail. They also had a higher survival rate than adults over the age of 35. No adults over the age of 49 survived. So deaths were extremely high around males between 20 and 39 at a rate of more than 66%. Men have been found to metabolize protein faster, and women do not require as high a caloric intake. Women also store more body fat, which delays the effects of physical degradation caused by starvation and overwork.
Okay, I was gonna say there's like a scientific reason for why it would have been the women.
I'm getting into it. Yes, this is why.
Certain children.
Yeah, this is why.
Yeah.
Men also tend to take on more dangerous tasks, and in this particular instance, the men were required to clear brush and engage in heavy labor before reaching Truckee Lake, adding to their physical debilitation. Those traveling with family members had a higher survival rate than bachelor males, possibly because family members more readily shared food with each other and didn't share with other people. They very much had a us versus you mentality. We need to survive. I don't care what happens to you mentality. Which, like, I know we like to think that we wouldn't do that, right? Like, we want to have this moral high ground. At that point, they'd been traveling with each other for 6 goddamn months. They were snowed in. They had had a hell of a trip, and they were all fucking sick of each other. On top of everything else. And so they were like, my kids might starve to death. I'm sorry, person I've known for 6 months. I am not going to help you. I want to help my children. Like, I get it. I do. It's one of those things. Like, you like to think we wouldn't do that. But until we're in that situation, we don't know what the fuck we're going to do. And I don't blame them for having that mentality. Some people do.
I don't know. I would not think that I wouldn't do that. Because
exactly.
I 100%
don't know.
would.
Yeah. But, like, I saw some articles that were like, I can't believe they did that. And it's like, really? You can't? You really can't?
No, I like 100% would do that.
They didn't know each other that well for that long. And they were about to die. Like, who are you going to choose?
You're literally on an airplane and people are like, no, you can't because my family. And I'm like, I just wanted to take a nap, but okay.
Even with that, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first. You know? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
no.
Can we not equate the Donner Party to a plane crash?
No, we won't.
I might throw
Okay, we're done with that. So, the only thing I have left...
I hate that.
I just wanted to end on this line because I thought it was a really good line. So, this is the line Patty Reed. She was one of the Reed daughters. She wrote this to her cousin after she was rescued. We have left everything, but I don't care for that. We have got through with our lives. Don't let this letter dishearten anybody. Remember, never take no cutoffs and hurry along as fast as you can.
Oh my God.
And that is all I have. All I have. This was 2 fucking hours. But...
Shannon, you're a big bummer.
I know, I'm sorry.
This sounds terrible considering what the Donner Party is about, but I am so hungry right now.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Look, I didn't eat before we started.
No, you didn't. We can go get food. It's fine.
Shannon and I just sat there and didn't know what to say to you.
I'm glad you feel comfortable enough to share that with us, Shelby.
Okay.
Look, I didn't say I was starving.
No,
I'm
you
just
didn't.
saying I'm hungry.
Man, I could eat a man.
I could eat a horse.
I could
Okay,
eat carpet.
do we have any questions or comments before we move on?
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
I tried to be thorough as always. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, our ending is that we have no ending. Goodbye.
Jeez.
Bye-bye.
Oh my God. Goodbye. Thanks for listening to The Triad. Our music is by Scott Buckley. Our audio is recorded by our sound engineers, Craig Bott and Audrey Credo.
If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and Tumblr as The Triad Podcast.
We're also on Patreon as The Triad. Currently, all Patreon funds will go towards the cost of hosting the show. Each tier has its own rewards, but every patron receives our undying gratitude. Do you have comments, questions, or stories? Email us at thetriadpod@gmail.com. And thank you again for listening to The Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive.